Hello and happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to the Small Business Briefing. I'm Brian Kelly, the CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Miller, Vice President of Marketing and Strategic Communications at SBAM. I'm joining you today from Franklin, Tennessee, spending a few days during my son's spring break in the slightly warmer weather than what we're experiencing in Michigan. So as always, we want to say a big thank you to Marana Group for being our sponsor. They are a data, document, and distribution company located in Kalamazoo. So Brian, it's Data Monday, and we're used to talking about COVID data, but Bridge Michigan has created a new feature, a Michigan Economics Dashboard, and it is Data Monday. So let's take some time to check in on that information.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about in concept and words, we've talked about a lot of these statistics. And what I like about what Bridge Michigan has done now, they created a dashboard that takes a lot of the things that we care about, or the metrics that we watch, and to put the trends on so you can see them all in context. So we will check in on this from time to time, but I want to start out with that today and just and go over some of these details so you can see where Michigan stands, how the recovery has gone. Now, this starts first over here is the unemployment rate, the jobless rate as they call it here. And you'll see Michigan here in blue, which got up to over 22% at the depths of the pandemic. And so this doesn't show the rise up, but it was straight up here. This starts in April of 2020. But in February and March, it went straight up all the way to 23%, almost 23%. It's come down, as you can see. Michigan still is higher than the national rate, although both have been trending downward. At the same time, average weekly earnings, this is the national earnings, which have been pretty smooth in going in straight and heading in the right direction. In Michigan, it's been pretty jagged, although trending about the same pace, just at a lower level. So Michigan heading in the right direction, but both with unemployment and with average earnings below the national averages. This one here on the right-hand side, labor force participation rate, is the one that I see as the most problematic. So you see Michigan's labor force participation rate. It's been below the national average for quite a long time. It was pretty flat over the course of the last few years, and then of course dipped way down and jumped back up, but stayed lower in the course of the pandemic. But something happened here in Michigan that was a little bit unusual compared to the rest of the nation. Remember, we had shutdown part 2 in the winter between 2020 and 2021. Labor force participation rate dropped down at that time, and it has never recovered. So whereas we were below the national average before the pandemic, we are now significantly below the national average. And you can look at this, it's, Michigan's being around 59% labor force participation rate. If you look at the national average and seeing it around 62%, you might think, well, but is that, that's pretty close. It's not close. It actually makes a pretty big difference. That's why our employers are feeling the type of pinch that they are right now. Small businesses, or all kinds of businesses, are feeling such a pinch. Over here on the left side of the screen, you see overall job openings, which are trending up a little bit over the last few months, and the separations, job separations, those are both layoffs and people who have quit their jobs, and you'll see that's pretty level as well. The new business starts has been the bright spot. If there's any economic bright spot in the pandemic, I would say this is it. We saw a really big increase in the new business starts, and they look at the employer identification numbers that are filed to determine this, and so you saw them jump up during the pandemic. And even though they're trending, you see they're kind of trending back down toward normal levels, still to this day they remain much higher than pre-pandemic levels. So people have turned to entrepreneurship as a response to this pandemic, or at least the changes in the pandemic. And of course, here at the Small Business Association of Michigan, this is very welcome news. Housing values rising at the national and the state level. You see that our housing values here are less than the national averages, but still you see these trends look pretty close to the same, and just Michigan's trailing down below. And here's one of the reasons why. You see housing permits, even though there's a ton of demand for housing right now, there are no more housing permits because, well, you got to have people to build houses, and the same workforce shortages that are being experienced across the board are definitely felt in construction, and of course materials and supplies shortages in the supply chain affect that too. And then here's if there's one area that is, to me, is the most concerning. So there's been plenty of good-ish information that has come out of this dashboard, but here's the part that I'm most concerned about. The consumer price index, which is right over here on the right-hand side. You see the inflation, this increase. We've talked a lot about that, but seeing it on a graph, you can see how outside of the norm it really is, and how that started in 2021. We could feel it in 2021. We started talking about it when it was still cold outside last year, and it's just gone up since then. And then consumer sentiment indicator, this is, you call this consumer confidence levels in layman's terms. And you see this is declining. And as consumer confidence goes down, this is something that over time, people can feel it when there's a lot of economic uncertainty. They start pulling back when they feel a little less secure. These side by side are the things that I'm most concerned about: consumer confidence falling and overall prices rising. So a really great resource by Bridge, Michigan, very well done. We actually used during the earlier stages in the pandemic, we regularly went to their dashboards for COVID information as well. They do a nice job with the data and kind of teasing out of all the indices you can look at, the ones that are most relevant to how things are going. And so it's one trend that you kind of see in Michigan is that we are kind of following the national trends, but behind. And looking at the overall macro numbers of consumer confidence and inflation, definitely the things that are on people's minds, and sometimes can be precursors to a softer economy or even recession. So I don't say that word lightly. I don't think that it's a foregone conclusion that we're headed to one, but high energy prices, low consumer confidence, and high inflation are all things that in past economic cycles have been precursors to slower economic growth and sometimes recessions.
Yeah, that is a solid tool from Bridge, Michigan, and we appreciate their reporting and look forward to sharing results on future episodes of the briefing. So Brian, March is almost over, and the afflicted business grants, which are now known as the Growing My Business grants, the deadline to apply for that is 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on Thursday, March 31st. So I want to remind everybody that this is a $409 million business grant relief program, and it's designed to help certain Michigan businesses that experienced a financial hardship due to the COVID-19 public health emergency, meaning you were closed or had restricted opening time. So if you think that you're in that category and you have not yet considered applying, please do so. Go to michigan.gov/ABR as in afflicted business relief, and check out the application and get yours submitted by 11:59 Eastern on Thursday.
You know, one other thing, Sarah, too, on those grants. So there's the industries that were closed down. They did leave kind of open-ended that if you're not in one of those industries that were restricted and closed down, but because those businesses were restricted and closed down, it impacted your business in a very direct way, you can still apply. It's not a guarantee that you'll get it, but you know, there are some examples of, you know, certain businesses that are maybe in districts where they serve office workers or maybe concert venues, And so if your business was really to serve that clientele, but they were closed down, you can still apply. It's not as direct line to get a yes, but you could still make the case. So I would encourage you to think about that. If businesses that were closed had a direct, you can kind of draw a line from them being closed to your business being afflicted, then why not make the case? If you've got the time, especially if your sales went down. If your sales went up, that's or if the Paycheck Protection Program made up any lost sales that you had, then your chances of getting approved at the grant are a lot less. But it's some of the industries are directly called out, but I think that they have left the door open for people to make the case for why, yeah, maybe I wasn't closed down directly by the government, but because these other businesses were, it had a detrimental impact on my business.
Excellent point. Let's talk a little bit about air travel. The CEOs of major airlines, they wrote an open letter to President Biden asking him to lift the mask mandate. I don't know that I have the exact date, but I believe it's currently set to expire in mid-April. It was just extended from a mid-March deadline. So what do we know about this?
It was an open letter, so they sent the letter to the president, but also published it, and basically they're asking for the restrictions on the airlines to be dropped, or at least as federal mandates. It doesn't necessarily mean that the airlines themselves would all decide to not. They can still have their own policies of what is required on the airlines, but to say the federal government should no longer require it. So what they're asking for is for the mask mandate to be dropped, but then also international pre-departure testing requirements. So if you leave the country, that other country may or may not have testing requirements, but when you come back to the US, you have to produce a negative test before you depart on your way back home. And so what the airlines are asking is for those to be dropped, and for pretty obvious reasons. I mean, it's more inconvenient if you have this kind of open question on whether or not you'll be able to come back on schedule. It's potentially a detriment to people wanting to travel. Just one quote from the letter that they had sent. Now is the time for the administration to sunset federal transportation travel restrictions. It added that the restrictions are, quote, no longer aligned with the realities of the current epidemiological environment, end quote. So that's I think it's really referring back to the movement that the CDC has made. In most places, the CDC is not recommending masks, and so given where we're at, kind of in the cycle at the moment, especially in this country with very low numbers, that they're asking that these restrictions be dropped. But as we'll see with Data Monday here, numbers are low right now, but I think things are, in terms of epidemiologists' expectations for this country, they have changed in the last 3 weeks, and so there's definitely some rising concern, and that rising concern comes right at the time when the president and technically the federal bureaucracy, but I would think that they're taking their direction from the White House, will be making some decisions on some of the few last remaining COVID restrictions, including transportation.
All right, well, let's go ahead and talk about BA.2 and what the case counts look like around the world and here in the US. We did chat about BA.2 on Thursday's show. Is another wave inevitable?
Well, I think that there are more epidemiologists that believe that some sort of an increase in Michigan, maybe a little bit more, not Michigan, but the United States, is perhaps more modest or expected to be more modest than the Omicron wave. But something like that is inevitable here. So looking at the country, you don't see too many places around the country where numbers are high. I know that, Sarah, where you're at actually, or no, this is Kentucky, isn't it? So just north of you there. Is a little darker, but that's actually cooling off. Most places in the country have been higher, and they're kind of coming down. You see Michigan's quite low right across the board, but and then looking at the country as a whole, so this is the United States of America, you see that the Omicron wave was really high, up over 800,000 cases a day. It's come down low, and now it's flattened out. And even if you zoom in just on that, on the last few weeks, you see it is very, very flat. But there are a couple of places that I checked in on, some of the bigger states, New York, Texas, California, and there are small increases over the last week. So almost everywhere has been on the decline. Actually, literally everywhere has been on decline for a while in the United States. But now we see, as they bottomed out, numbers rising a little bit in a few of those states. And looking at the ICU and hospitalization across the country, again, this is the country as a whole, see the numbers still continuing to decline. I think I think it's baked in that these numbers will continue to decline for a few more weeks, even if the case counts start rising, because there's generally a lag, and you see deaths declining as well. Anytime you see hospitalization and ICU declining, you're obviously going to see deaths declining as well. This is Michigan. Now, Michigan's has leveled out too, and leveled out at a pretty low level, not quite as low as it got last summer, but pretty similar to the late summer experience of 2020. So it's definitely leveled out here in our state. And even when you look closely, this is a zoom in on just the last 90 days, you'll see that the numbers are very, very flat, low and flat. So for now, things look fine. Looking at the at those other states, it looks like perhaps they'll the next few weeks we might see a small uptick, and then after that, who knows? But we'll keep track. We look at the bigger states, probably be a precursor for what would be coming our way. On the ICU inpatients and the hospitalization, both of those continuing to decline here in Michigan. If you look here, going back, look how low these numbers have been for a while. That's why you see the hospitalization numbers continuing to decline and get to very low levels. Deaths, of course, falling in Michigan as well. And then taking a look across the pond in the United Kingdom, this is what is happening in a lot of Europe right now. So this was the Omicron wave, and it fell down, and then it wasn't down for very long, and it turned around and started rising here with this BA.2. This is a BA.2 variant wave, and so it's gotten higher and pretty quickly. However, and it actually looks like in the last few days that it is leveling out. So perhaps, actually, let me go back for a moment. You can't really see it all that well. Maybe it's leveling out a little bit. When the numbers get reported today, actually over the weekend, it should be pretty telling. And then looking at deaths in the UK, you'll see that this Omicron wave, due to their high immunity in the population, high levels of vaccination, especially among people over 50, this Omicron wave, and then Omicron being less serious, causing less serious illness than its predecessor variants, was lower anyway. So perhaps, again, I think the UK will show us whether or not this looks more like an endemic as opposed to the pandemic experience that we've had so far. So, overall, I would say that there's nothing inherently in the numbers in the United States that is concerning, but the expectation among the epidemiologists does seem to be shifting to some inevitable increase here. It's just a matter of when and how big that it gets. I still don't think that it would change the U.S. strategy all that much. I would say for employers, the biggest risk is going to be absenteeism at work. So sick kids or sick employees, and the idea of covering things. If numbers rise here, no sign at all that our state government is interested in going back to the types of restrictions that we had before. And I think even if you saw a rise that's bigger than what kind of the people are hedging for right now, it probably wouldn't change the regulatory environment in any kind of significant way. But again, just as a reminder, there is the way that that OSHA, the Michigan OSHA, the Workplace Safety Department and state government, they interpret the general duty obligation to provide a workplace that is free from serious harm or death. They lean on the CDC recommendations for that. Right now, the CDC does not recommend masks anywhere in Michigan, save for the places where the feds require it, which is healthcare, long-term care facilities, and public transportation. So outside of that, CDC doesn't have any recommendations. That means that OSHA has no recommendations. But if CDC changed their guidelines and that kind of filters through to the workplace safety standards, doesn't mean that there would be an absolute requirement for masks. There are no regulations for masks. Just one of those risks, one of those gray areas where we want OSHA to tell us that there's no longer an expectation that workplaces have mask requirements. They won't directly say that. What they say is that you have to provide a safe work environment, and they rely on the CDC guidance to determine what that is. So we'll keep you up to date on when and how things change. But at this point, I think, things look very good in Michigan right now in terms of disease spread. And if it changes in the future, we'll definitely share it with you.
All right. Well, speaking of things looking a little bit more normal or pre-pandemic, SBAM is actually hosting our in-person annual meeting and small business summit on June 16th. So we're in the process of finalizing details and getting registration open. I expect that to happen in about 2 weeks. But if you're interested in coming, meeting us, and spending a day at our amazing summit, please mark your calendar for June 16th here in Lansing. I don't know, Brian, if you want to add anything about the event in general.
This is always a great event to come to, and you'll see business owners from all over the state that gather together with us. It's our biggest in-person event each year, and there's a lot of change in business these days, and that's really going to be the theme. There'll be breakout sessions, there'll be big programs. You'll hear a lot about what's been happening at SBAM, but also what's happening in business and with business, and different trends that are being experienced. You'll hear directly from business owners, your colleagues and peers on that, and really looking forward to it. So there's a lot of business in transition these days, and that will be the theme, and hopefully a lot of good peer-to-peer learning that happens in the meantime. So we'd love to have you. As Sarah said, just save the date for now, June 16th, and then we'll let you know the details, and definitely here on the briefing, we'll be sharing the link when available for registration.
Yes, it's a fantastic event. I highly encourage you to consider coming. I also want to make a quick mention that you're tuned in here on Facebook or on Zoom, but SBAM is active on other social media channels as well, and we do share different content based on that channel. So if you are on Twitter, LinkedIn, or Instagram, and you aren't following us yet, would you please go out, find us, and follow us? I think you'll enjoy seeing the different types of content that we share to our audiences every day and every week. So I think that's all we have for you today. Have a wonderful week, and we will be back here on Thursday.
Okay, everybody. See you on Thursday. Thanks for joining us.